Hello everybody, Justin from Playing Board Games here, and today I have 5 spoiler-free tips, or as spoiler-free as I can make it, for the Drowned City campaign expansion. This is the final one of these until the next expansion comes out. I've finally caught up. Yes, we did it! And today I'm going to give you these tips to hopefully give you a better blind run of the Drowned City campaign without getting too overwhelmed by the mechanics within, or also, you know, getting spoiled in the process of learning how to handle the scenario. You can find all the previous campaigns down in the video description, but I think it's time to just dive in and see what the Drowned City is all about. This is probably my least played campaign of all of these, mostly just because I've played it the least, because it is the newest. However, I think Drowned City is a fun campaign and provides some interesting challenges to the players. So why don't we just dive in and go with this one. First things first, you're gonna want some method to consistently evade in this campaign. Generally, evasion is not the most common method that people use for enemy management, but there are some mechanics within this campaign that make it so that you're going to want to be able to have methods of evading enemies when they show up. There is a variety of reasons for this, whether enemies be sticky, which means that they'll stay on the board even if you manage to deal with them through damage, or alternatively, there are going to be recurring enemies that will be a big thorn in your side, or mechanics on those enemies that mean that you kind of need to make sure they're locked down as opposed to just wandering around on the board causing havoc. This is something that I've noticed in all of the runs that we've done of this this campaign, is that if there is someone who is able to consistently evade, we actually have a much smoother ride than we would if that investigator was not there. So this could be as obvious as a rogue investigator, or a mystic with an evade spell, or even like a sword cane with the mystic class can go a long way. Just having some method, like Rita Young as another example, just having some method that you can consistently evade enemies to kind of just make sure that the things that you can't kill right now, or the things that are sticky, are locked down, just to kind of have like threat control. There is a big thing about this campaign where it kind of puts threats in your face, and the damage methods is not always the best method of dealing with these enemies. And Drowned City wants to have you answer enemies or manage enemies in different ways, and that's where evasion can be really, really strong for that. Next tip we got here is a scenario's objective is simple, but you'll want to push your luck. Drowned City is a very interesting campaign mechanically when you compare it to what you'd expect from a normal ARKHAM scenario. In normal ARKHAM scenarios, you get like the main objective, which is do this, and then along the way it kind of becomes get victory, right? That's kind of the side objective, this one. But in Drowned City, the main objective is very simple in most of the scenarios. It's actually like, and the reality is easy to do in the majority of the scenarios that you're going to play in this campaign. However, in each scenario, and mechanically across the whole campaign, there is a certain mechanic that means that you're going to want to push your luck to find within each scenario. So again, the base objective is very simple and very doable, but the scenarios are going to ask you as a player and as a team, how much are you going to push your luck? How much are you going to risk defeat? How much are you going to risk getting trauma? How much are you going to risk losing certain things that you have in order to go for this side objective that kind of moves through the entire campaign? If you know from the preview article, there's these things called tasks. Those are only one small piece of the puzzle. Drowned City's kind of like mechanical identity is just basically like to-do lists. It has like a variety of small little things that you can check in each scenario, and the main objective is only one of those check marks. So yes, you can win the scenario very easily, but then you can look back at your to-do list and realize there are 5 things you haven't checked, and that's kind of where like the meat and potatoes of the gameplay of Drowned City lies. The scenarios are very simple, but there is a lot of game packed into them in terms of the pushing your luck and exploring and searching things out, which is again very interesting compared to some of the other campaigns that we've seen, but it's just something to keep in mind when you are playing the Drowned City and when you're building your deck. You're going to want to be able to go the distance, right? And you're going to want to be able to push yourself and push your luck, and you're going to want to ensure that your deck allows you to be confident in your ability to push your luck. Next tip we have here is methods of dealing damage to multiple enemies can be very good. This one kind of attaches itself to the first tip that I had here, where evasion can be really good for enemy management. Likewise, like in Dream Eaters, cards that deal multiple damage, like damage to multiple enemies at once, have a very good place in this campaign. There is some phenomenal enemy design. You're actually going to find out that most of the tips in this campaign are going to be relating to enemies, which is kind of funny because I just recorded the Hemlock Vale video, which came out a few months ago on the channel. And that one I also said that like the fighters are challenged. I think that generally it's easier to challenge the fighters with enemy design because enemies are more in your face. With the previous spoiler-free tip I had, that's kind of how the cloovers are challenged, where they kind of fall into the push your luck side of this. But the fighters are challenged by some very tight enemy design, and that's going to continue into one of our previous points as well. However, if you do have if enemy management is the goal of your deck, things like Dynamite, things like Storm of Spirits, things that deal damage to multiple enemies at once with one source can be very nice in this campaign. Just know that this campaign rewards you for clever enemy management, so you should kind of bring that into your deck as you're building it and trying to figure out what the hell am I going to do for this Drowned City deck when I'm going to be the main fighter. Just know that this rewards clever thinking. Next tip we got here. Saving on movement will help in different ways scenario to scenario. Here is the classic tip we have in these spoiler-free videos. Movement compression is very good. This happens like we saw this in Edge of the Earth. We saw methods of this in Feast of Hemlock Vale. I'm pretty sure we also saw this in Innsmouth, if I had to guess. But the reality is that all of this movement compression is good for different reasons. It's not like you are going to fall apart as a team if you don't have movement compression in all these campaigns. However, it's going to ask for your compression to come in other ways, whether it be clue or damage. However, something with the Drowned City is that, remember that thing I said about the push your luck aspect for this? A big thing of this is that these scenarios are going to ask you to go out of your way multiple times. So you're going to want to be able to move back and forth or even move across a map like that, right? So this is less like Edge of the Earth, where, for example, you want to be able to move around because you want to have to save on movement because the maps are big, right? With Drowned City, you're going to want to be saving on movement because some scenarios are going to ask you to move a lot. Some scenarios are going to ask you to move very little, and the movement compression is actually going to kind of be a little bit bad in your deck. But then at a certain point, those scenarios that ask you to move very little are going to suddenly, potentially, ask you to move a lot. So it's one of those things where like you need to have ways to do, whether it be small, incremental free movement or burst movement, can kind of just change from scenario to scenario. So it's one of those things that, well, yes, this is a tip that comes into your deck building. This is going to be a tip that's going to come into your own play style when you're playing a scenario. If a scenario seems very tight quarters and you're looking at a movement card in your hand, that might show up later. It might be one thing that you don't want to use right now because of maybe, as you've seen in some of the previous scenarios, it's going to suddenly ask you to move a lot. So it's one of those things that just keep in the back of your mind for when you're coming to your movement tech in this campaign. It's just going to help you to get a bigger handle on the push your luck aspects that the Drowned City provides. Because I think that's like the big thing. Like if I had to think about the two big things for this campaign that kind of pop up, it's the enemy management is different, and the push your luck mechanic is huge throughout this whole campaign. And you want to be able to confidently push your luck, and having the ability to adapt to your movement to what is needed can be really beneficial. So if you want to get big burst movement, then you don't need to get the incidental movement. If you don't want the big burst movement, you're going to want more incidental movement. Just some things to consider as you are putting your deck together for this campaign. Last tip we got here is the enemies can be big and overwhelming. Plan accordingly. I mentioned the enemies are a big thing in this campaign. The enemies are very tightly designed in this one. I think that the enemies can be very manageable, but suddenly you can be looking down at a turn and being like, why do I have to deal with 14 health worth of enemies this turn? So it's one of those things where this kind of just comes in with everything else. I just wanted to stress it here. This campaign is actually very mechanically simple. It doesn't really have a lot of big sticking points in terms of strange mechanics that you need to be able to handle through your deck building. The big thing I think in this campaign is the enemies. The enemies are, they're fine until they're not. And they can suddenly become very not fine, and they're going to ask a lot of you in terms of health, and in terms of the number for attacking them, or in terms of the threat they bring to the board. We were doing a run of this on the channel recently. I think it's done by the time this video comes out, where Travis Byrne and I are going through the Drowned City, and Travis is playing a Spellcaster Luke deck. And the amount of times that he just is empty on his spells, and then he has to spend cards to fill it up. It's one of those things that you can't just get by with like 2 kill spells and like hope that you can like make it work with events. You're going to want to make sure your kill spells are constantly stocked up, because this game is going to ask a lot in terms of the health that these guys have, and also the tricks on those cards to make them something you need to solve right now, which is also why evasion can be really important, because you can kind of kick the can down the road, set up and deal with the small things, refill your spells, refill your weapons, like your firearms, all that kind of stuff. Again, melee is king, but that's just the design of the melee cards. They're just like very, very good. With all that said, I hope these tips give you a little bit of some insight here on the Drowned City campaign. I had a hard time with this one because, again, I think the campaign itself is actually pretty simple mechanically. I don't think it really requires too much from you as a player, or to stretch your deck in ways that you otherwise normally wouldn't stretch it. But again, the 2 big things, enemy evasion can be very pivotal to having a smooth ride versus a bumpy ride. And also, this is going to require you to push your luck, so don't be afraid to push your luck or build your deck to give you that survivability to have more confidence in pushing your luck. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I'm so excited to go back to do this again once we go to the new campaigns when they start coming out. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a good one. And as always, the GGs.